Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach, and on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the generational cycle of trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, how to regulate your nervous system, a lucid conversation with powerful ideas and practical tools. I am speaking with certified mind-body practitioner Jennifer Mann. She has worked in the health and wellness industry for 10 years as a functional movement therapist, holistic body worker, yoga teacher, Pilates instructor, and performance coach. At the peak of her career, she became severely ill with chronic fatigue, severe anxiety, POTS, chronic back and hip pain, and many quote-unquote unexplained symptoms, leaving her bedridden. She was told that she would be ill for a very long time and that she may never recover. She has a background in physiotherapy, biomedical sciences, and functional movement. She went on to fully recover and co-founded a nervous system healing program for chronic illness called CFS School, and has helped over 1,000 people from all walks of life learn the language of their body and heal their physiology to live a better life. In today's conversation, Jen talks about the polyvagal ladder, the mind-body connection, the importance of body-based work, developing safety in our body, explains what disconnection from ourselves means, and offers insights on connecting to ourselves, as well as she walks us through several simple and key practices for regulating the nervous system. A fantastic episode, one that you don't want to skip. I know many of you really enjoy when I recommend past episodes, so here are a few that are relevant to today's topic and will further enhance your learning. Episode 152, How Trauma Gets Stuck in Your Nervous System with Irene Lyon. Episode 289, Developing Mind-Body Tools with Rebecca Ladine. Episode 326, Befriending Your Nervous System with Deb Dana. Episode 347, Heal Your Inner Child with the holistic psychologist Nicole LaPera. Episode 320, How to Practice Self-Compassion with Marissa Knox. And episode 305, Breathing and Your Health with Patrick McEwen. They are also linked in the show notes. Please enjoy. So, Jen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. So great to be here.
I'm excited to speak with you about regulating our nervous system. But first, I'm learning some practical exercises and tools from you. But first, I want to say congratulations. You're a new mom. You have a 7-month-old baby. And I want to begin by asking, before you became pregnant, I know a little bit of your story. You have done trauma healing work, you immerse yourself in this nervous system study and learning and practicing and teaching others how to gain safety and regulation in themselves. What showed up for you when you became a new mom?
That's such a great question. So a few things showed up already in my pregnancy, and a few of these things were some of the wounds connected to my mom and just the relationship that I have with her and the feeling that I had most of my life around, am I enough? Am I worthy? Which is connected with my father wound as well. But it's so interesting. I think the am I enough? Am I worthy? Caught me really off guard, because in the last 3 months, my baby was breech. And I was in Italy at the time, and in Italy, you can't have a vaginal birth if your baby is breech. There's some rules and regulations. And I was just just craving a vaginal birth. I really wanted a home birth. And so I was really upset that my baby wasn't turning. And I got this huge trigger around, I'm already failing as a parent. I'm already failing my baby. Like, is my uterus broken? What is wrong with me? Why can he not turn? Yeah. And I think I just got really overwhelmed for a few weeks because I was just doing so much work around helping him turn. And I got kind of stuck in a little bit of my unworthiness wound. So that's what showed up immediately. And then when Leo was born, it kind of happened even more. I noticed when, I don't know, babies cry. And sometimes he would cry when he was teeny tiny. And I could feel the same experience in my body show up. Like, why am I not able to soothe him right now in this moment? And to be fair, he only was crying maybe for a couple of minutes, but it was so powerful, the feeling in my body of, oh my gosh, I'm failing. I'm not worthy. Does he love me? Am I loved by this babe? Just all these things, which are dynamics which show up with myself and my parents when I was a kid. And I've done so much work around them. And yeah, that really took me by surprise. So I had to dive in a little bit and just remind myself of, I am me. I am not my mom. I'm not my dad. I'm also not my 5-year-old self. I am my now self. I've done so much work to bring my nervous system up to date to who I am today, into the present, my adult self. Yeah, so working around those triggers was very powerful, actually, because it allowed me to continue the work of, just being regulated enough that my baby, and that's my wish, that my baby learns how to co-regulate and self-regulate based on my love and my regulation and my groundedness. So yeah, it's been a beautiful journey so far with all of these unravelings happening. But then because I've done so much work, yeah, it's been really nice to apply what I know on myself in those areas and not let the triggers or the wounds just, stay open and really affect me. So yeah, that's a little insight into the beginning of my journey of motherhood.
That's pretty powerful. What I'm hearing is, we can never heal something and be done with it. It's never complete. There is always some kind of silent volcano in there, and life can throw curveballs, unexpected things, right? New events can trigger us and awaken things in us. But I think the most important thing is learning the key principles and tools and practices, adding them into our toolkit and reaching for those tools when we need them, I think is key, because it's not like, oh, I'm going to regulate my nervous system and live a perfectly happy life from now on. I healed my trauma, I think knowing that this is an ongoing process, but we can always reach for a tool. And today, what I want to talk to you about mostly is creating a toolbox, adding really key, important tools in our toolkit so that we can reach for those tools in the moment of need. I find that, it could be hard in the beginning. I can create a toolbox, but when you are a novice, it's really hard to reach for the tool. You're like, what am I doing? What am I doing? But as time goes on, as you practice, it gets better and better, and you become you fine tune your skills. You know what tool to use almost automatically. So what are some how can we create this toolbox, the trauma toolbox or the healing toolbox? I don't know. How would you like to name this toolbox?
I think a really great name would be coming back to yourself toolbox, because one of the core reasons for nervous system dysregulation is a disconnect from our true self. And there's a disconnect in a way that we've been living our life, moved through life by a nervous system that has all these very powerful patterns in place to keep us safe. And because they have worked thus far, we could potentially continue to live our whole life with these unhelpful patterns. So I think when we learn how to tap into the language of our body, the language of feeling, of coming home to ourselves, I think that what you were talking about, like knowing when to reach for what tool, everything changes, because it's not anymore like, oh my gosh, what tool do I use? It's like, I know what I need. So we get in touch with our needs. And one of the main things about this disconnect that I'm talking about is a disconnect from our true needs rather than what we think we should be doing in life. Often we find ourselves feeling and thinking in a certain way around, life and work and people, and the patterns that we're running, like perfectionism and high achieving and people pleasing and fawning and all these compromises to who we really are, rather than taking up the space and feeling that we're worthy of using our voice, of being in our body. I think that connection back to self through the nervous system is so powerful. So in terms of where to start, it's really about learning the states that we're in through our days.
Before you go to the states, can I just ask you to expand a little bit on this connection? You already said needs, right? And one of the things that we find ourselves disconnected from is our needs. The second would be our sensations, feelings. So could you talk a little bit about what this connection means? How am I, someone who is listening may say, like, what does this connection mean for myself? What are you talking about? Right? I think it would be good to clarify and expand a little bit.
Yes, I definitely agree on that. So the connection to our needs and, really comes from knowing what emotions we are feeling and the thoughts that we're having. I think right now, in this wave of like nervous system regulation that we're all in and somatic practices, we still need to be in tune with our mind and the thoughts that we're having. It's not only about the body, it's also about our beliefs and the thoughts that we're running. And I'm really a big believer in combining the two. And where the connection happens, if you think about it, the body and the brain speak the same language. All day they're interacting through neurons, hormones, and it's just this two-way network and gateway of communication. But the mind and the body, they don't speak the same language. They try to communicate, but there's a miscommunication usually happening. So the beginning of this work and learning to tap into the body is about learning the language of the body, which means learning how to sit with what we're feeling. So learning how to tap into the emotion that exists in our body. A lot of the disconnect and why we're unable to do what we know is right for us, for our body, for our heart and our soul, is because we are unable to feel that it's wrong. We're repressing. We're used to feeling a sensation and a sense of dis-ease in our body. And when that message of dis-ease arrives in our mind is a meaning-making machine, and it tries to make meaning of the dis-ease. But because it's not the same language as emotion sensation, we go into all these patterns of overthinking, overanalyzing, hypervigilance, or the other way around, repressing and shutting down and just redirecting rather than being. So to kind of answer your question about expanding on this, yeah, it's really important for our mind and our body to learn how to speak the same language through learning how to feel and feel safe in feeling. A lot of us don't feel safe being in the body. We don't feel safe processing what's happening in our body. So through that process, the information that comes back into the mind and then gets fed back into the body, it's like an interruption of the loop that's happening on automatic. And so that work is so important.
Yeah, great. This is a good explanation. So becoming present in the moment, tuning into the sensations of the body would be a first good step, because for someone who has, shut down and is unable to feel feelings, you have to start somewhere, right? You have to just maybe develop tuning into your sensations so that you can then develop that safety, because it could be very alarming and difficult. You can have even trauma response, right? If you start to feel the enormity of feelings. Can you say a few words about like the very beginning stages of like dipping our toes into the sensation level, instead of saying, feel your feelings. Okay. Ooh, it's scary. I don't want to feel my feelings. So how do I feel my feelings? Where are they located? But rather sort of developing a sensory experience intelligence. That's my understanding. I don't know what you can...
Sensory intelligence. I love that expression. Yeah, so juicy. I love it. Why I was talking about states earlier is because almost the step before what you're talking about is becoming aware of what our pattern is. Like if we try to go into sensation or feeling or anything in the body without having an idea of where we're at on a spectrum of, extremely associated only into our body and hypervigilant versus dissociated and shut down. And a lot of us aren't aware. It might seem easy for you and I to understand, but for a lot of people who haven't done this work, they don't know what it means like to be hypervigilant or what it means. They just know that it feels uncomfortable in their body and in their mind as well.
Or it could be sometimes it's so their natural state that they live in, they habitate that state. It's their normal. They don't know that another possibility exists, right?
It's like a fish in water. A fish has no idea that it's underwater. If you ask a fish, what is water? Probably like, I don't know what water is. Oh, it's this? I guess it's what I'm living in and breathing through. Yeah, it's just the normal. Absolutely. Yeah. So going back into kind of the first steps, usually when people come to this work, there's usually something that they want to resolve. And usually it's not a person who's thriving and everything is fine. And they're like, oh, I want to regulate my nervous system. No, usually there's a chronic migraine or back pain or chronic fatigue or like anxiety, depression, and something is just not getting unstuck. And so that's how they usually come to this work. And so also understanding like a little bit around when did that pattern first begin? Because it's really important for us to understand the state of our body when we understand when and how the pattern began. So for some people, it's just always been there. It's a state that's always been there. And so there's that investigation. And for other people, they don't know what pattern they've been, and then all of a sudden they have back pain. And so analyzing and looking at where to begin around the symptom that they're experiencing in their body and in their mind. And then once you have an understanding of the state that you're in, through recognizing the words that you're speaking, recognizing the sensations that you're having in your body, then you can go into a practice that is dipping your toes and learning how to be with the body a little bit more. Because a lot of people, including myself, when I was ill with chronic fatigue and really debilitating anxiety, none of this makes sense until you start to do the work and you start to understand how powerful it is to learn the messages that are coming from the body.
I mean, you're pretty young now. I don't know if you want to say your age, but you suffered chronic pain, right, throughout your life because you were a dancer. Do you want to say a few words about that? How long you suffered with chronic pain and anxiety?
Yeah. So anxiety my whole life. I had panic attacks when I was a child. I fainted a couple of times. I had phobias. I stuttered so much. For me, talking was just such a trigger, just allowing my voice to be who I am and allowing myself to be in the space of the world as myself was very hard. And then, yeah, I became a professional ballet dancer. And I was just getting injured so much more than everyone around me. Not everyone, but most people. And I just kept asking myself, like, why am I always injured and why am I in pain more than other people? It's normal to have some pain, but not to always be in pain everywhere. I was so tired and fatigued. And so I had this big injury, which made me completely have to interrupt my career. And I went into body work, yoga, Pilates, and I qualified in everything that has to do with movement. And I just became so curious, what's beneath the skin? Like why do muscles respond in that way? Why is there pain? Why is there a movement pattern that's not working for this person? And my interest was always around, but what if this pain or injury was not coming from the area of the pain and injury? What if it's coming from somewhere else? And for someone who, for most people, especially coming from a sport, if you have pain in your shoulder, it's usually, your mind is going to go to the shoulder. So that was my experience in my body that led me to really want to learn more. And then I went back to school and I studied biomedical sciences and physiotherapy. And when I was in school, just my anxiety went off the charts. I was shaking a lot in the day and my heart rate was being very irregular. And then there was a few things back to back that were quite stressful. And I started to have really bad pain, like worse than ever in my shoulder blades, my hips, my calves, which are really fibromyalgia points. And because I was studying physiotherapy, I knew that. And I was questioning, like, do I have some sort of fibromyalgia or pain disorder? And because I was a dancer, I was kind of used to being in pain, but I was so curious. And surely enough, within a couple of years, I completely crashed. And from one day to the next, although I had pain and my heart was beating irregularly and my anxiety was really high, I was still fully functioning. I was just, my body was saying no. And I was just saying, shut up. It's fine. We're tired, but it's okay. Keep going, until I couldn't keep going anymore. And I just found myself, my whole back was completely stuck and in pain. And after a few days, I got a fever, and then that's it. And then I was diagnosed with a whole bunch of POTS, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia-like symptoms. And the doctors told me, you probably never going to go back to life as you know it because of the severity of your symptoms. And we just don't know what's going on here. And yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of my further unraveling of like my super interest in the interaction of the mind and the body, which isn't really talked about in medical school, physio school. It's really not, especially around pain, chronic pain. Like it's all about the structures. And so I had to do a lot of deconditioning around my understanding of the body and just relearning around what I felt intuitively was more accurate versus what I had been learning. But a part of me was like, where's the science? Like, where's the proof this is what's happening? Because there's a whole body of evidence around the mind-body connection. And obviously we know that's how the brain and the body interact, but around the actual function of the nervous system and the information it holds in the communication. It doesn't just move parts of your body or trigger electrical stimulation. It actually carries information which impacts, everything. I really see our nervous system as the orchestra director of all the other systems. And when it is not working properly, it's all of a sudden directing an orchestra that isn't in harmony, isn't in melody, and all of our systems begin to shut down, really, because that's what happens when you experience a severe form of nervous system dysregulation, and you have all sorts of symptoms, like from the blurry vision to autoimmune disorders to anxiety, depression, and everything in between, really. Yeah, so that's a little bit. And I'm 31, by the way. Yeah.
And the good news is, by learning to regulate your nervous system, that there is hope that you can regain vitality and health and mobility and all of that. You're living proof that the symptoms are no longer there. I'm not sure what symptoms do you currently have. Are you symptom free? Like, what can you say about your life now?
100% recovered. I have no pain. I have no fatigue. I have learned what anxiety means and is for my body. So when I feel the sensation in my heart, in my chest, in my rib cage, I know that a part of me is being triggered, and I know exactly what it needs. It just needs to be seen. I really see my anxiety part as my inner child whose needs were unmet. And so just that instant, in real time reparenting, that's also nervous system work, really just soothes the body immediately. And especially because I've practiced that pattern over and over again, it really is instant. Even if the trigger is, I don't know, let's say one after another, my body still recovers very quickly. So yes, absolutely, you can recover and you can heal. And this work is so powerful. And it's more practical and faster than any of us ever thought. Like, embarking into this journey, the stories that I had access to 3 or 4 years ago, the healing was so long, they were like 5 or 6 or 10 years of really hard work. And although, as you said earlier, the work of healing and recovery and just learning how to be in tune with your body so that you can connect with your emotions and cultivate the safety, although that takes time, the actual work of getting your body to move into balance and homeostasis is not actually this huge mountain.
I just love what you just said. Yes, I so agree with you. And by just regulating that nervous, and I'm sorry I interrupted you because I got so excited, by just learning to regulate your nervous system, even though you may not have that internalized sense of safety, you will get there eventually. I mean, obviously, everybody's on a spectrum. Some of us are more wounded and traumatized than others. But once you learn to work with your nervous system states and move from one to another and regulate, I'm so excited to cover some tools with you. You gain that confidence, you gain that sense of hope and possibility, and eventually you develop that sense of safety within yourself, with your body. It doesn't come right away, but because you regulate your nervous system, I mean, you said it better than I'm interpreting. It's really powerful what can happen, what shifts can happen in the body, then your mind can understand and interpret and feed to your body. And it's this bidirectional communication opens up, right? Sort of.
It's incredible. It's so, I'll share a small video on Instagram, and I will have hundreds of people message me, say that this small tool has turned their whole day around, or it's the first time in 5 years they've cried, and I'm thinking, wow, this small tool that takes 2 minutes, where you're tapping into a little bit of your vagus nerve, a little bit of movement, moving up and down the ladder, which we can talk about very soon, the polyvagal ladder, moving into your skin, our nerve receptors in our skin, feeding back information into our brain that isn't scary. Oh, so much can change. And just repeating these types of exercises alongside, some of the inner child work, some of the parts work, the brain retraining, but to know that there are some tools that we can very practically access that can really turn our day around and can tone our vagus nerve, send a message to our brain that the work that we're doing is creating a state of more comfort, more ease, okayness, because at the beginning, it doesn't feel like comfort or safety. It feels like I am a little bit more okay now. And that small win is everything. It's proof. The work that you're doing is working. It's proof. And when we're healing, we need that, because if we don't see the proof of the work that we're doing, it's hard to stay connected. So that's why I think these practical tools are just so relatable, because there's an instant feeling like when you do some of these tools, 90% of the time, you will start to yawn. And that's just a beautiful sign of your parasympathetic coming in to save your day in that moment and just be like, I'm here. I'm here to follow these waves and to bring you into a state of more connectedness, because it's not necessarily calm, because if you're in a disconnected state, then the same tool will act to bring you into a more connected. It's not always bringing us down into parasympathetic. Sometimes we need the other way around, and a lot of the tools work to bring you in the middle, which I think is so good, because when you are experiencing hardship and stuckness, that's what you need, you need something that is just accessible.
Yeah, I understand this part. I'm not sure if the listener might understand. So I really want you to open this up and maybe just talk about the nervous system ladder here. And before you do that, I would love to recommend, I recorded an episode with Deb Dana. I can't remember off the top of my head which episode that is, but the title of the episode is Befriending Your Nervous System. So I would highly recommend the listener to listen or re-listen to that episode either now or after they finish this episode, because they all go together very well. So I think it would be wise to speak about the ladder now.
I love Deb Dana. Everyone go listen to that episode right now.
I know, it's such a great episode. I loved it too. And she did some practical exercises with me. It was pretty eye-opening for me too, personally.
Amazing. I'm so happy for you. Yeah, so the ladder, our nervous system evolutionarily is made for our survival. And so the way in which it works is that when we have a threat, when we're confronted with a threat, whether it's real or not, we have all these cool ways to come out of it alive. And some of these are running away, freezing, fighting. The only issue, which I'm sure many of you have heard this already, but the only issue with that is in this day and age, when the capacity, the overwhelm of just the speed of life, like sometimes the speed of life right now, it's like our bodies haven't caught up yet. It's so fast and so much, and just slowing down can do so much. But when we do this work, we teach the nervous system to redirect some of the pathways that it's stuck in. So in the ladder, the first port of call of our nervous system is to respond by engaging with our face, that's social engagement. But if that is not enough, we move into the fight or flight, the sympathetic response. And if that is not enough and we still feel unsafe, then we go into the shutdown. So if you imagine that you are an animal out in the wild, Peter Levine explains this so well in his book, Healing Trauma, Waking the Tiger. And imagine you're an animal out in the jungle and a lion is chasing you and you're running away and you're running away. And then you're like, yes, I'm running away from the lion. I'm saving myself. And then the lion pounces, tries to attack you, and you fight back a little bit, but the lion is stronger. So you're moving down the ladder, and then the lion has like its claws in your neck. And then you shut down and you play dead, you freeze. And the lion is like, oh, well, there's no need then, because this animal's already dead. There's no need for me to continue. So that's what happens in our body, except there's no lion. It's just our internalized trauma that's just representing its loops, because they're unfinished loops, really, which is what's happening. And we're just going over and over and over, and we just need to find a discharge. So what the nervous system work does is it helps us access a discharge. It helps us access new neural input, sensory neural input that allows our brain to redirect its energy and its pattern into a different experience, which is in our body, in our skin, in our vagus nerve, in our organs as we tap into those. So that's really what the ladder is. And through the work, we can move up and down the ladder to regulate our body in ways in which can serve us in the moment, depending on where we're at, whether it's more a state of anxiety or a state of shutdown and dissociation. And so there's exercises that help both, and exercises that you can use if you don't know where you're at that still bring you into the middle. Yeah, how does that resonate with you?
It's great. I think it makes sense, and you explained it very well. What tools can you share for someone who doesn't know yet what state they're in, right? They're listening for the first time. They're curious. How can I identify? Am I in shutdown? Am I, in sympathetic? Am I just in ventral vagal? Where am I right now?
Yeah, where am I? So a very powerful exercise is to start by moving your hips. So if you're standing up, you have your hands on your hips, you're just moving your hips in a circular motion. And this starts to activate the really deep part of our parasympathetic, our depersonalization, derealization, dissociation. Even if we're not there, if we are there, we will start to respond. If we're not there, it's still helpful because we're mobilizing energy. When we have the anxious energy that we need to discharge and redirect, movement helps anyway. So starting from our hips can be really powerful. So just moving our hips in a circular motion and then twisting our spine. So if you imagine you're standing up, your hands are on your hips, you're moving your hips in a circular motion, and then you start to twist your upper body, and you can also start to use your neck where you're looking past your shoulder. You're twisting from side to side, looking past your shoulder. And what this does is it starts to tap into moving up the ladder into the energy that's moving into the heart area. And the heart area is where our sympatheticness is. So all the symptoms associated with the fight or the flight or the fear and the anger and like just the discharge. So opening and closing your chest. So we've had our hands on our hips. We've done the circular motion with our hips. We've moved from side to side, looking past our shoulder with our head. It's starting to use our eyes as well. Our eyes are so powerful in the work of the nervous system. Side to side, and then curving your spine and arching your spine. So if you bring your arms up to 90 degrees, you bend your elbows and you bring your hands close to each other as you curve your back, and then bring your elbows back as you arch your spine, and you're curving and arching, and you're accessing movement in your heart area, accessing movement in your lungs. Another one of the signs for anyone who's listening, am I in a state of sympathetic activation, is shallow breathing. Something so powerful about the shallow breath is that it is automatic and autonomic. And when we're stuck in a shallow breath, all our body is getting is, I'm in a state of stress. I'm in a state of having to keep myself safe. So when we move our lungs without even trying to change our patterns of breath, we're already accessing a different capacity, lung capacity, just by breathing. Because if you breathe normally and then you breathe whilst you open and close and open and close and arch and curve your spine, your lungs are already opening and closing more. So you're already giving more oxygen into your body. And for those of us who experience pain, one of the elements of pain is also decreased oxygen in our muscles. And so by increasing lung capacity, you're increasing oxygenation in your muscles and giving a little bit of relaxed response into your muscles, into the areas of tension of your body. And then my my personal favorite is using our hands to tap into the functional stimulation of the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is, for anyone who's listening, you might already know what it is, but it's two nerves, actually. We always call it the vagus nerve, but there's two. There's one on each side, and it's a nerve that runs from our spinal cord, and it goes basically into all of our organs, and it manages the rest response of our body, of our organs, the rest and repair. So if you imagine the vagus nerve being that break where we go into, say, we're activated, the vagus nerve helps us deactivate, helps us calm down. So the thing with the vagus nerve is that depending on its tone, meaning how active it is in achieving this response in the body, we can have a better or not response of this rest and repair and rest and digest in our body. So stimulating our vagus nerve really helps to activate that vagal tone. So the tone represents the function of the nerve. So activating the function of the nerve to do what it does best, which is bring us back to balance. So I'm going up the ladder. We've done our hips, we've done our twists, and then we've done arch and curve. And then we want to tap into our voice. And what we want to do, I'm just going to talk you through it. So we're going to inhale, and you're going to make a voo sound. And whilst you make a voo sound, you're going to tap your chest. So inhaling, voo.
It feels good too.
And what this does is my head feels like a bit lighter after that.
Yeah, mine too.
You feel that? Yeah. So the voo pattern creates a shape in our vocal folds in our voice box that triggers the vagus nerve to further activate this rest and digest. And the rest and digest, for everyone who's wondering, oh, but maybe I'm already in like a really restful state, meaning I'm in the lower part of the ladder. I'm stuck in dissociation. So I feel like I'm already resting a lot all day. Actually, it's not just rest and digest, it's rest and repair. So if you are in the lower part of this ladder, it actually helps to bring you up. It helps you regulate in that way as well. So moving up into the voice box using our voo sound. And then you can also add an ah sound after the voo and an e sound. So when we do e, everyone who's listening, I know you'll be trying this as I say it, but when you say e, there are two parts on the side of your neck that kind of come out. You can feel them with your fingers. And these two things that come out really activate all the muscles that surround the vagus nerve, so that are innervated by the associated nerves. And so we're really giving even more activation and blood supply into our vagus nerve, which helps it work better. So the E and the voo-ah-e, it's called voo-ah-e. So voo-ah-e, and you can do it all in one breath whilst you tap on your chest. So let's do it together. So we're going to say voo-ah-e, and we're going to do it in one exhale. So inhaling through our nose. Voo.
Oh, I see. So you do it in one out breath, all the three letters. Yeah, I got it.
You can just do voo, but voo-ah-e just gives you a little bit more. I don't know if you can feel the buzz.
I just felt it. Yes. I'm like, okay. I did. It's pretty fascinating how momentarily you can change your nervous state.
It's so fascinating. And when you are stuck in a state that we're used to as a society to go about how we feel through our mind, questioning, analyzing, trying to fix. And here we're just, we don't even ask the mind anything. And I feel like when we do this kind of work, the mind is like, what? What's happening right now? You don't need me? Oh, this is different. And the mind gets new information from the body. And then it starts to respond in a different way. And then the body responds in a different way to the new speed. When we don't ask much of the mind, of the meaning-making machine, it slows down. And the slowing down helps our body slow down as well. The output of those hormones, stress hormones, comes down a little bit, and it really helps us to feel better, to feel more connected. So then we go up into our face, and there's so many. I like to add in some Qigong trigger points. I love Eastern medicine, and it's like in the West, we've tried to replicate what 2000 years ago they already knew, which I think is amazing. That innate wisdom. It's like through our evolution and development, we've lost touch with our intuition about our body, but there's so much power in some of and if you actually compare the polyvagal work with some of the Eastern practices, there's such a big overlap with accessing trigger points that help us to regulate. So moving up into the face, I'd like to offer 2 trigger points that are really powerful. So one is if you feel with your 2 index fingers, if you feel your cheekbones, and then you move just under and you almost cupping your cheekbones so you feel the tips of your cheekbones and then just little circles in that area. And then from here, moving down into our masseter muscle, which is our jaw muscle, and just using our fingers to massage from our temple down to our jaw, from our temple down to our jaw, just there. And we hold so much emotion in our jaw muscle, so much anger and fear, and there's so much emotion that gets held there. So when we do this, we releasing a bit of that energy, as we were saying earlier, discharging the energy. So those 2, and then finally our eyes. Our eyes are used in so many practices. EMDR is all about the eyes, and EMDR is a great trauma therapy.
Have you done EMDR for yourself?
No, I didn't. I had a few options, and I resonated more with somatic experiencing, and there's a little bit around re-traumatize, a little bit around the theory of EMDR versus somatic experiencing, that I just resonate more with the somatic experiencing approach on the body. But eye movements are so powerful, and it's an exercise by Stanley Rosenberg in his book Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve. So if you interlace your fingers and put your hands behind your head, it's called a basic exercise. And then you bring your eyes, only your eyes, your nose stays facing forward. Bring your eyes all the way to your right. And ideally you want to stay here anywhere between 30 seconds and 1 minute. But when we have lower vagal tone, it's common for us to experience a bit of dizziness, so we can do only 10 seconds if that's the case. But hands behind, looking all the way to our right and staying there for up to 1 minute. But if you're just starting, probably 10 to 30 seconds. And then when we're done, coming back into the middle and just relaxing our body for a few moments, feeling the effects. A very common response is a yawn or a deep sigh, especially when we've been repeating these exercises for a few minutes. And then the other side, hands interlaced behind your head, moving only your eyes to the other side and staying there. And often one side will be a little bit more than the other. And that's often indicating of a lower vagal tone of one of your vagus nerves. So if one side is, you have a bigger response, you're most likely to have lower vagal tone on that side of your vagus nerve. And then I could stay here for another 2 days giving you so many more practices. But that's a little bit of the ladder work, moving from your belly all the way up into the face and really using our muscles in our face to bring us into that social engagement. And another thing for anyone who does experience dissociation or shutdown or depersonalization, derealization, any of these states where we feel disembodied, the eye movements are very powerful because it doesn't require a lot of movement. Often when we feel disconnected, it's hard for us to mobilize to access movement. We feel shut down. So the eyes are the easiest, like, port of access, and also the response in the nervous system is so powerful and strong when we move our eyes from side to side.
Yeah, eyes are the only part of our nervous system that is outside of our body, right? They're part of our nervous system. I find that engaging the vision in different ways, and I've spoken about this on the podcast, is really powerful. And in terms of EMDR, we have covered EMDR in depth on the podcast, and I'll link to those 2 episodes. And I am in EMDR because of the podcast, because what I've learned, and I can say that it's quite powerful. However, my therapist doesn't use the eye movements. She uses the tappers. They're called tappers. Again, that's bilateral stimulation it creates. You hold those plastic things in your hands and they sort of buzz and vibrate. It's pretty fascinating. So when and how often can someone do the exercises that you mentioned? Just regularly, anytime they feel disassociated or disembodied or agitated? Can they just do it prophylactically? You know, how many times a day? I would love for you to give a little guidance on this.
Yeah. So at the beginning, it's a little bit harder to know when to use them. But as you become more connected to your intuition of what you need, you know, those needs that we were talking about, then you'll know, oh, I need it now. I can really feel that I need this now. But at the beginning, becoming aware and in tune with the dis-ease. So if you are coming into this work, you are 99.9% connected with a sense of dis-ease. So going back to the beginning of the episode, dipping your toes into this work is learning what and where your dis-ease is and when that shows up throughout your day, because that is really key to understanding where the state of your body is. And it's usually happens from the moment you wake up and we just don't catch it. And then all of a sudden, after a few hours, we feel anxious or not, you know, present, and maybe we have a flare-up of pain or fatigue. Or so from the moment we wake up in the morning, just becoming aware of the thoughts that we are having and the general state in our body, like how out of from 1 to 10, what is the level of ease that I feel, you know? And if that's not a high number, there's a good chance that you're in a state of dis-ease. And so that would be a great moment to use the practices. And I always give the ladder as a start access into this work, because you're accessing everything. And at the beginning, especially when you're a self-healer and you're not, you know, maybe seeing a practitioner every week, or as a self-healer, having access to a ladder that will bring you through all of the states of your body can be very helpful. And then you will learn what feels best in your body. That's really key, learning what feels best. And in terms of how many times, there is no magic number. Unfortunately, we all want a prescription, but it's all about the shift in your body. As you do these practices, you will start to learn the language of the sensations of your body. And when you learn that stimulation in your body, you start to recognize, oh, okay, I feel the response now. I don't need this anymore. It's done its job. I can move on. But again, it takes a bit of practice. Like every skill, every new skill takes time and practice.
Wow, this is great. So as we approach the end of our time here, what would you like to share? A tip or a challenge or a question that a person who has learned all this information, like bring it home. Let's tie that bow on this box. What would that be? A key message, maybe?
Yes. So my key message is that you have everything you need to heal inside you already. You have access to the medicine of your healing inside you already. And just reminding yourself that when you're doing this work, I have access to the healing inside me. I think it's so powerful. It really helps us connect with our true self. Like, wow, I have this, I'm not broken. I have this part of me that is already whole, already healed, and I can access it through regulating my nervous system.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, I just want to ask one last question. What kind of practices do you use on a daily basis these days? I didn't ask you. I am dying to know. Maybe I can have you again. What kinds of therapies you have done? What were the first steps? What you found helpful? What healing looked like for you? When did you notice differences? I am really curious about that. But currently, what's in your toolbox?
So what's in my toolbox now that I have that instant connection with what my needs are? Like, what do I need right now? Okay, I need to slow down. So usually it's just like an understanding of what I need based on the work I've done. And everyone can get there. All of our clients and all the people who do this work, you do get there. And then accessing I call it a redirect. And the redirect is tapping your whole body.
With your palm.
With your palm, going up and down your arms, into your chest, your belly, the front and the back of your legs, and your lower back. And this really allows for a redirect of the energy that's in your body. And sometimes all we need is a little distraction, a little redirection for the brain and the body to be able to be present again. And so I think that's one of the tools that I use still in my day to day. Another one is the bilateral butterfly hug. Have you heard of it before?
Yes. I read all Stanley's book and other books. Yes.
So instead of the traditional interlacing your thumbs and alternating the tap of your palms, I do a hug, and I call it a nervous system hug. And so you give your upper arms, so you're hugging yourself, you give your upper arms a squeeze, and then you exhale into the squeeze. And then when you are ready, and you'll know when you're ready because you feel kind of like an easing in your chest, a letting go. And as you do this work, you'll feel more connected to your sensations in your body. You let go. And then you alternate the tapping in the part of your body. And just that containment, there's the containment hug, but this type of containment with the bilateral tapping and the squeezing, that touch that really moves into our muscle, not only our skin, is very powerful for our body. So those two I really like in the moment when I need just a bit of grounding and to come back into the present, remind myself to slow down.
And do you find yourself more in the sympathetic activation throughout the day? What is your pattern, or more disassociation?
I'm a recovering high achiever, type A perfectionist. 2 right feet forward, just like, so I've done so much work in understanding how I got there. And so when I sense myself going there because of maybe I'm being triggered by my environment or something, so my inner child needs to feel like she needs to catch up and she needs to prove her worth and prove her validation, I just go in and I repair and I soothe. And that's also the work of nervous system healing. And then, I just go in, and then she just knows what to do. And my vagus nerve and my nervous system is like, I just needed you to see me and to tell me that it's okay not to constantly be proving yourself, to constantly be running and moving fast. So the big lesson of my life is that you can still be fulfilled and achieve anything you want in life by moving a little bit slower.
Wow. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I really enjoyed this conversation and the way you explained things and the practices that you shared. I hope they can translate through the audio, but I will have links to your Instagram and to your pages, your websites, and the offerings that you have, the courses, so that people can really take advantage of that. I think you're doing incredible work, and I find you very calming, nurturing every time I watch you. So thank you so much for being here, and congratulations again on becoming a new mommy. Enjoy the ride.
Thank you. So beautiful to be here, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. This is one of my favorite topics, and I hope the information was clearly explained and that you get to use the tools and practices in your day to regulate your nervous system. I would love to hear what your biggest takeaway from this episode is. So get in touch. I always love hearing from you. If you have a comment, question about the podcast, about a guest, or anything related to the show, you know where to find me. Send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. Call the number 732-763-2576 and leave a voicemail. And yes, I do prefer audio. And for international listeners, you can use the free SpeakPipe tool on the contact page of my website. Go to authenticparenting.com/contact and send me a message. If you want to connect with your fellow listeners from around the world, engage in meaningful conversations about the podcast, get support and answers to your parenting questions, join the Authentic Parenting community on Facebook, a private support group for people like you. Do you love the podcast and find it helpful? Show your support by becoming a patron on patreon.com. With a small monthly contribution, you can make a big difference. Join other active members who believe and support the work of authentic parenting. Be sure to find the show and follow it wherever podcasts are played. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and elsewhere. And finally, if you want to know what I'm up to in my private life, see behind the scenes of podcasting, get some inspirational content, follow me on Instagram, the only social media platform that I use. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.